Greetings. Welcome to Eric's Angle, the podcast for Iowa State University mathematics students. I am your host, Eric Weber, chair of the mathematics department. Today's guest is a 1992 graduate of our program earning a PhD. His name is Anand Medepalli, and he is chief product officer based in London. He describes himself as a firm believer in talking to the engineers, advice that I believe our students would benefit to heed. Please welcome Anand Medepalli. Thank you, Anand. Welcome to Eric's Angle. I appreciate you being here.
Delighted to be here, Eric.
So let's start a little bit with your story. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, well, it's a long story, obviously, but I'll try to keep it short. Originally from India, grew up in India, got my master's degree in mathematics in India, and decided that I needed to continue my studies and get a PhD. And back in the day in India, the options for getting PhD in India was pretty slim. And also a lot of, and the US was definitely a destination for people for higher education. So it was a no-brainer that I would be applying to US and US only. I applied to a few grad schools, and ISU was one of them. Don't ask me how I chose it. These were not the days of the Google. So I just eeny, meeny, miny, more randomly picked from the big fat book that the US Embassy that was helping local students to figure out how to apply, etc., gave me. And along with this, I picked up a couple of other universities, and I got offers from all universities, including ISU. The reason I chose ISU was because who became my major professor, Dr. Fink, he sent me a handwritten letter. Everybody else just typed stuff and sent it to me. He sent me a handwritten letter. And it was obvious that he actually read my personal statement and, understood on one hand my ambition and my wishes, but also understood my weaknesses and my insecurities about all of that. So he addressed that very beautifully. And I thought, you know what? Probably Iowa is where I need to go. Iowans seem to be a bunch of good people. So I landed up there and ended up getting my PhD. It took me 6 short years. And that is partly because of the subject that I chose to do my actual PhD in. My entire coursework was in pure mathematics. Loved pure mathematics all my life. But my thesis itself was in what is a subject called combinatorial optimization, which that great Dr. Fink actually introduced me to in one of his seminars as an example of functional analysis application in real world. I mean, that's what it was. It was about, if you look at what optimization solutions do is they figure out when you distill the space for the constraint with the constraints that determine what you can and can't do with your objective of maximizing your profit or minimizing your cost. There are certain constraints that you have to worry about. If you have a parcel of land, the area of that land is what you got. So how do you parcel it so that you put the right crop in the right place? Which crop to go for how much? I mean, those are all constraints. And if you look at that space, actually in mathematics, it's a convex hull, and therefore it became a part of functional. So he introduced me to that, and I fell in love with that subject. Found a professor to guide me in my thesis from computer science back in the day, because nobody in pure math department wanted to do that. Dr. Fink had moved on to Australia on a sabbatical at the opportune time. So I actually ended up getting a degree, and I spent most of my time between Carver Hall and Atanasoff Hall with Dr. Fernandez Baca, and got my PhD there. So that's my journey. And then after that, of course, I was lucky enough to land a job with American Airlines, and my career started after that.
So were you expecting to have a career in industry when you came to Iowa State University?
Oh, absolutely not. Actually, growing up, one thing I always enjoyed was interacting with people. And even when I landed at ISU, the The biggest attraction for me was, or rather the biggest excitement for me was the fact that I was a teaching assistant, not a research assistant.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very clear. I enjoyed the fact that I was teaching, 6 credits, and it was a lot of fun. And teaching was my passion. I actually wanted to be a teacher, a professor. But so I did my PhD thinking that. But as I was doing my PhD, I realized that the subject area in which I'm doing my PhD in has significant implications in the industry. So I started to scratch the surface on that. And it was also a time, this was 1992, as I was graduating in 1993 is when I left. This was also a time when when the country was going through a tiny bit of recession, if you remember back in the day. And so therefore, the jobs were where we went, and teaching jobs were just not possible or available. And I wanted to teach at a university level, and that was just not possible at that time. And I did fall in love enough with my subject area that I wanted to explore that and not give it up. So coincidentally, American Airlines, which actually had probably the biggest, what is known as the operational research department, which is basically another word for optimization or combinatorial optimization problem, because they have planes, they have flights, they have passengers, and the decision making of which flight goes on which physical plane flies which particular route, carrying what kind of passengers, is a optimization problem on steroids. So they were attracted to me because I had both the mathematical skills, so I was able to write Greek symbols on a blackboard without passing out. So they liked that. So in other words, I could come up with the models, I could come up with the algorithms, but they also liked the fact that I actually go then and sit down and code it up and actually see it work and action. So that's the attraction they found. The attraction for me was very clearly, hey, this is the biggest operations research departments. If this is the place I could learn how to fine tune my craft. So yeah, no, growing up, even halfway through, 3/4 of my way through my PhD, I was very clear that I wanted to be a teacher. I just, in the last bit, that I changed my mind because I fell in love with that subject so much, and rest is history. I never looked back.
Well, that's an interesting story. I mean, I think when I reflect on my own journey, I took many turns differently than I originally anticipated. So I always enjoy hearing other people's stories that have a similar
yeah, I know you
it.
told me you were going to be an actuary, weren't you? I mean, and then you decided
At one
to be
point.
a professor. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah.
Yes.
That is key. I mean, so to those of the youngsters who are listening to this, I mean, you may be you may have predetermined what you want to do. And that's great. If you really know, if you're super clear about what you want, go for it, but be open-minded. I mean, if I wasn't open-minded, if I closed my mind, or if you weren't open-minded, ISU would have not benefited from you. I wouldn't have, the industry wouldn't have benefited from me, and me from the industry, right? I mean, so be open-minded, keep your eyes and ears open. There are many different paths to Rome, as the old saying goes. So you will, I strongly believe that everybody fulfills their destiny or reaches their dreams or what have you. There may be different paths than what you originally thought they would be. Don't be afraid. Take the path. And sometimes the path least traveled is the most interesting one. Definitely the case in my life.
So speaking to that, being open-minded and to use the phrase, expect the unexpected in some sense, what could you tell our students as they're taking classes and thinking about their long-term career trajectory and so forth? What should they be doing as a student to prepare for these types of turns that they might not be anticipating?
That's a good question. I mean, when I was doing mathematics, the choices were very limited as to what you could do with mathematics. The predominant choice was to be a teacher of sorts. I mean, a dear friend of mine, he was my office mate in Carver Hall, John Hanson. He decided to stay put in Ames, and he is teaching and he loves it, and he's a dean of a community college, and teaches mathematics even now. And so that was that would have been my path as well, and I would have loved it, I'm sure of that. So those were the only few choices. I mean, it was just happenstance that I picked up a subject with Dr. Fink that led me to a different path. So that is very different today. I'll digress just 1 second to make my point. My son, he's 18 and he's applied to universities and he's going to go off to university in September, assuming his grades come through like he's expecting them to. He's mathematically gifted. He's very good in mathematics. There's no doubt about that. But he does not want to do mathematics. He wants to study history. And which is great. I mean, definitely happy for him to go do that. And he's applied and he's gotten offers from good universities. So he will make a career of himself. But here was the funny thing that happened. As we went to open days at universities to check them out, one particular university that we went to was a university called University of Edinburgh up in Scotland, which is a very prominent big university here in the UK. And as we were standing in line to go talk to the people of history department, in that big hall, there were other stands as well. And this gentleman, we were standing in front of a stall, waiting for that stall to free up. And everybody was making a beeline for the history department's stand, but nobody was at this particular person's stand. And this professor and his student, because we were literally standing next to each other, said, "Hey, how are you doing? What do you have here to study?" And my boy said, "History." And he said, "Hey, do you want to consider what this department does?" And my boy said, "What does that department do?" So it was a variant of history. It was history and policy or something like that. So not too far from what my boy wanted to study. So obviously I got curious and I said, "What is different?" And this blew my mind. He said, "If you're mathematically gifted, this is the program for you because you get to study history, but we do policy analysis." So in other words, we study history to inform us about what could happen because history repeats itself. No matter what anybody else says, that is absolute truth. Look at what the world is going through right now. We've been here before in the world. All you have to do is look back and actually learn from it to go get through these set of crises that are, whether it's the economic crisis, the political crisis, authoritarianism crisis, whatever you want to call it, all we've been through. So you were saying that when policies come out, back in the day, it was a wet finger in the air to hope that the policy would do what it's supposed to do. Now we can model the potential outcomes of those. And I am looking for people who are interested in history and policy, but who have a mathematical bent of mind. He didn't say you need to be mathematically gifted or anything, mathematical bent of mind. Think about it. In my time, nobody would have told me that. History and policy department is looking for mathematically orientated people. So my advice to all youngsters out there who are doing mathematics is embrace it, love it. Whatever the branch of mathematics, just do it. And then your branches open up. You can go into public policy like my boy would have had he chosen that. He stuck to history. He did not apply to that department. But he walked away saying, "I never thought of that. I know that I'm going to do that." Another example, a prominent figure, there is a think tank in London called Tony Blair Institute. The ex-prime minister founded it. They do really amazing work in terms of policy proposals, etc. They advise governments, but they also publish thought leadership papers up people to think about it. One of their prominent figures was a history major from Canada and came and did master's in London School of Economics, and his master's degree was in history of economics, or the economic history. I can't remember exactly the exact title of it. There, you needed mathematics, but he wanted to put the context of history with economics in it, because at the end of the day, why is history forming? Why do we make history? There is people, there is society, there is economics, there is all those things. So he needed to put it into context. So if you're doing mathematics these days, you have probably 10,000 options in front of you to choose from. So embrace mathematics and then decide what's your passion. Public policy, check. Data science, My goodness, everybody wants data scientists. I am desperately looking for data scientists all the time. No matter what industry you're in, you need to be a data scientist. Of course, your hope when you were young, actuarial sciences always needed mathematics. Any subject, even it's the funniest thing, healthcare, the biggest revolution in healthcare is taking place with artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence at its core is if you just distill it down to, call it deep learning, what have you, it is all about regressions. So if you have a mathematical bent of mind, you may not be able to write all the programs to create all the AI programs out there, but you are probably in one of the best positions to actually interpret the outcome of that particular model. So why is the X-ray showing, and is this a false positive or a false negative? You can interpret those easily. So think about it, a mathematician applying to healthcare industry or a hospital to be the analyst of what the AI models are outputting. So the revolution that is taking place in our society in the form of ChatGPT or generative AI, as it's generally known as, requires analytical thinking, because otherwise you will be consumed by it, because you will just start believing anything that it says. And this is the era of fake news and all that stuff, and therefore fake information. Can you imagine a doctor making a decision inadvertently based on something fake? But for a mathematician or somebody like mathematical frame of mind who's saying, wait a minute, let's interpret this properly. That's what is the opportunity in front of anybody who studies math. So as my boy walks away from mathematics, having studied mathematics all his first 18 years of his life, I do know that he has the grounding in mathematics enough that should he go to do whatever he wants to do post his history degree, this mathematical thinking, mathematical frame of mind will put him in good stead no matter where he ends up in. So keep an open mind and embrace mathematics, because honest to God, I honestly cannot think of another subject that is going to be so versatile. Whether you go to industry and of course you teach, there's no question mathematics will be useful.
Indeed. Yes, the way I like to think about it is, I don't know that anybody would say, I really wish that person knew less mathematics or was less mathematically inclined, right?
Absolutely.
Everybody wants more mathematically inclined
Absolutely.
colleagues, employees, and so forth.
No, absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, if you people look at you a different way when you say, actually, I get mathematics. So yeah, it's a good conversation breaker these days. Fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to call it, we are no longer geeks.
Yes, that's right. So, what would you say was most surprising as you entered a career in industry versus academia? Were there? I'm thinking specifically things that, when I reflect on my own journey to where I am now as chair, I never really thought I would be in a managerial role. And so I have had no training for that or really prior experience. Have you had similar experiences to that? And what would you say to students as they ponder whether they might find themselves in a similar type of position?
I mean, again, I would say embrace it. I mean, so the thing that really helped me as I went into industry was the rigor that I had to have when I was pursuing my grad degree at Iowa State, right? I mean, so, I couldn't get away with saying rubbish. I couldn't get away with simple assumptions. I couldn't get away with lazy proofs. I mean, this is just not. So my DNA changed while I was at ISU, of being rigorous, of being systematic, of having a plan as to how to attack a problem. I mean, I still remember, a couple of take-home exams. I mean, I'll drop another name, Dr. Kleeman, Wolfgang Kleeman. He gave, I studied, he did dynamical systems course, and I took that course under him. And he gave a homework, take-home exam, basically, over the weekend. So he basically gave it on a Thursday evening, and we had to turn it in on Monday morning or something like that. And it was one of the hardest exams that I ever did. I mean, and it was But what got me through, and I genuinely thought, I read each question and I thought, I have no idea. I have no idea. I have no idea. I have no idea. I ended up getting an A minus on that particular exam. So I still remember it because it was a very traumatic experience for me to open a paper and for the first time be stumped on every question. But the rigor that was instilled in me by every professor of mine at ISU of, hey, step back, break the problem down, think, take a walk, come back, approach it differently, look at it differently. That ability got me through that. And that was how my PhD thesis came about. I mean, my PhD thesis work, I was never the smartest kid in the class, but I was a hardworking person, and I followed the principle of being methodical and being rigorous about anything you did. I don't like to do things that are shabby. I just don't like them. So that helped. So that discipline I took to the industry. So because in an industry, approximate answers are good enough. I mean, people make decisions based on, because outcomes are never certain. If you build a forecasting algorithm and you forecast how many units of this particular product you're going to sell, there's no guarantee. You give errors around that. But the rigor that I had helped me think about, okay, if my prediction is wrong, so I put myself in someone's shoes and I said, okay, Anand, the mathematician, gave me this algorithm and it produced a forecast. Forecast is going wrong. I can see that it's not going to be that. It's something else. What would I do? I can call Anand and curse him. Sure. It still doesn't solve my problem. So what would I do? I have to do something with it. So I got very interested in what would you do if I gave you a wrong answer? And figure that out and made it part of my solution to them, saying, I think I'm right based on all the input data, everything that I did, and the best mathematical model that I could build is going to predict this, but it could be wrong. If it is wrong, here is how you get out of that corner and solve your problem. Because at the end of the day, you need to do that. So this approximation is how businesses run. There is never a perfect answer. There is never a theoretically best solution that any business leader can live with. Impossible. Theoretical answers are no longer good. So you do need to become practical about it. So you can argue, therefore, that from the theoretical best answer to give approximate answers, I became intellectually lazy. Yes, mathematically, because I had to be practical, but the rigor in me told me, but be really good at how you help them overcome the gap that they will invariably see with this quote unquote intellectually lazy answer. I mean it in a mathematical sense. It was a perfect business optimal answer, not a mathematically optimal answer. So what is the business optimal solution that I had to give? So that's why don't take shortcuts as you finish a course. Don't take shortcuts in trying to get through an exam. Yes, you have to get through an exam. You have to get your grades. God bless you. You will get there. But try to be intellectually honest in a classroom, ask probing questions, try to be intellectually honest in how you do your homeworks. Yes, collaborate with your mates. If it's a take-home exam, all of us do it. I'm not going to ding you for it, but make it your own. Understand it and make it your own. Challenge Eric and any other professor to explain one more time why that is. Why? Because the 4 years that you're spending at ISU, if you're an undergrad, and another few years if you're a grad student, that cocoon of ISU is not going to go with you. You will go by yourself and you will be exposed. And the only thing that will help you through, and this is my personal experience, is the rigor. The ability to step back and ask probing questions and not be afraid of asking the right questions because you just want to get to ultimately the right answer is the discipline that mathematics can give you. Don't squander that opportunity of being very curious and being intellectually honest with yourself. So that is the thing that I took to industry, and that helped me significantly. And as it turns out, looking at my career, it helped the industry as well. I mean, I wasn't kicked out of any job, knock on wood, because I was known to be somebody who brought my mathematical skill to the fore. I'm one of those lucky guys who still does some form of combinatorial optimization in their life. So I'm very lucky. I've always built forecasting and optimization software and algorithms and things like that. So that's why I'm a lucky person, and I thank ISU for it. So you will do too. Just be rigorous in what you do.
Wonderful. So I want to thank you again, Anand, for appearing on Eric's Angle. This has been a wonderful discussion that I think our students will really benefit from. So thank you again.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thanks for having me, Eric, and good luck to all of you out there.